gathered this afternoon with some friends to talk about what's going on in our nation. If you're like me, you're just mortified at the things that have been happening. They've been happening for decades, but we've really noticed them. Like someone I read the other day on Twitter, it's not more racism, it's just being filmed. And so now we are seeing what's going on. Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, just the murder of people because of the color of their skin. And so I've assembled some friends to talk with us a little bit about racism in our country, in our state, their own experiences, and how we as white brothers and sisters in Christ could be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And so I want to introduce these gentlemen to you. This is Izah Broadus. Izah is pastor at New Faith Church in Little Rock. This is Bryan Smith. Bryan has lived in Hot Springs a long time. He's from El Dorado, Arkansas, executive at Allied Rubber, and also is the police chaplain for the Hot Springs Police Department. So he brings kind of lots of different ways of looking at this into this discussion. And then Donald Crossley, Brother Don, longtime pastor here in Hot Springs. He's from Benton and has lived here, taught at ACTI for years and years and years, and has pastored all these years as well, pastoring now, and for the last, 20 years or so, I guess, at 23 years at St. Mark's Baptist Church here in Hot Springs. Our congregation we've done some cross-pollinating with each other over the years. And so I'm so glad to have these guys. I consider them all friends. I've learned from each one of them in various ways, and I think they're going to be able to give us some insight. So let me start by just asking you guys, as whoever wants to speak up first, feel free. Would you talk to us about some experience you've had where you felt the sting of discrimination or racism directed at you simply because your skin is not white?
I think the first time that I initially experienced it, I was at a country club. I was swimming, and I noticed somebody from above that was looking out of a window up top. Probably within the next 10 to 15 minutes, there was a young man that came down, and I was asked to leave the country club. Really didn't know why at the time. I figured it out. In my younger years, I was a pretty good athlete. And somebody somehow informed whoever asked me to leave. They say, well, that's Bryan Smith. That's the baseball player. And so I got another message. They came down and said, oh, you can stay. And after thinking about it, I left. And that was probably the first time. The second time, I was driving from Little Rock, and the police stopped me, pulled me over. And he came up to the window, and he said, boy, whose car are you driving? Okay, so I'm a young guy driving a Mercedes-Benz. He could have easily found out who car it was by running the tags or asking me for my paperwork. But when he said, boy, whose car are you driving? I knew right then something was wrong. So those are two that come to my mind right off.
Wow. Painful. Don, Izah, one of you?
I would have to say the first time that I experienced it was at an early age and didn't even know what I was experiencing at the time. I remember going to the town store in the town with my father, and I was always the type of person who spoke to everybody. And if we went in the store, I was speaking to people, but people didn't speak back to me. And so if we left the store, my father was explaining to me that you're black. Some people doesn't speak back to us. And just having that conversation at an early age, I still didn't understand why the people didn't speak back to me. A second time is I had just bought a F-150 truck. And I didn't know that black boys were supposed to have a F-150 truck. And I got pulled over by the police. And he walked up to the truck, actually had the gun out, and said, you know, you aren't supposed to have a truck like this. And I was just dumbfounded that I couldn't have a F-150 truck. And so that came off a little wrong to me, that because I'm black, I don't supposed to have an F-150 truck.
Wow. Don?
That actually I grew up in Benton, and there was a lot of racial things going on during that time. I grew up when you go to the courthouse and they had white water fountains, they had black water fountains, they had white restrooms, and of course the white restrooms was always nasty. I remember the times when we would go to the movies, and of course if you were a black person, you had to sit in the balcony. You couldn't sit down on the floor. That wasn't so bad, I guess. We could still see, but it was the separation. And I remember when we would go to certain restaurants, we couldn't go to the front of the restaurant. We had to go to the back, come in the back. I remember a friend of mine who had gone to Vietnam, fought in Vietnam, and he came to a particular restaurant and went in, and they just told him, said, we don't serve niggers here. And he said to them, I didn't come in and ask to eat a nigger, I just want food. And there was a big fight broke out in there. So I've seen those kind of things happen. I remember walking down the street one day, and a young man and his girlfriend, I guess, was in the truck. And he asked me, did I tell her I was going to whoop her, so-and-so and all. And I've never seen her. And at the same time, she's telling him, I told you he's not the one. He's not the one. But he was just set, I guess, on wanting to attack a black man. So, and I've lived long enough, I've seen where black men have gotten killed in jail. You know, and well, it's just some things that have happened you never forget.
Yeah, you're old enough to have grown up in the Jim Crow era, and even after those laws were put down, still people pretended that those laws were never put down and continued to do everything they could to discriminate. Well, when these kinds of things happen, how does it make you feel? I want to ask you an emotional question. Is it rage? Is it depression? What does it stir in you emotionally when you're treated this way?
It's there up some anger. It makes you feel sad, especially when you're the type of person who doesn't look at race, but to get treated that way, it makes you sad in the inside. You just want the rights and privilege of any other person, but in this America, we doesn't get the rights and privileges of any other person.
Well, it certainly doesn't make you feel good, and I think when we are faced with certain situations, it causes you to not trust people. Sometimes people can try to befriend you, and I'm a person who likes to kind of observe. I'm not real quick to build a relationship, or I watch people, and there are certain little things I look and I say, I'm not sure about this. And then there are other times I think there are people who do things. I've been even to churches, and I think sometimes in the white churches, sometimes they kind of overcompensate to try to make you feel good. And then there are others who really don't care whether you feel good or not. I remember back when I was in Broadus Bible College, one of my professors came in and he was so excited. He was saying, wow, we voted this weekend to take blacks into our church. And I just kind of laughed. I said, we've never had to vote on things like that. You know, I didn't know that was such a big issue. You had to vote to do it. But you sit there, you don't say anything, but those things kind of stick in the back of your head.
Okay. Yeah. So the professor thought he was really on the cutting edge of social change, and
Sure.
yeah. Bryan, what about you? When that officer pulled you over and called you boy and treated you like dirt?
I think initially it was shock. Had never had that happen before. I'm one to believe that we are who we are because of the things that we've gone through in life. And because of some of the things that I've gone through like that, I'm a very private person. My circle is small. I'm not telling you that it's right, but that's the way that I am. Very protective of my family. And just because of the things that I've gone through in my life.
All right. Speaking of family, as a white person with white privilege, and anyone who wants to deny that that's there is just out of touch with reality in our country. We just need to own that and admit that. But as a white parent, I never, when I've talked to my kids as they got their driver's license and stuff, it's like, well, if you ever have, get pulled over by a policeman, just be respectful. And, what I'm hearing is that white parents have different conversation about this kind of thing than black parents have to have with their kids. What are the kind of things? I know you've got Kimberly and you've got kids, you've had kids. Did you have to have a different conversation with them about this sort of thing?
Yes. One thing I tell my kids is something I always do. If you get pulled over, have everything already out. No movements. It's like if you move, one of us move, or the police have us pulled over, we don't know we're going to get shot. And so that fear always running in us. And so I always tell my kids, have your license, have the insurance, have everything already in IV, so you won't have to make no certain movements while you pulled over. So we have to have different conversations with them. And like the cameras are showing it. What we've been experiencing for years, the recordings are showing it now.
I guess I've with my daughter, probably one of the initial things that I've asked her to do is if you're stopped, have your hands on the steering wheel. And then when he asks for whatever, or she asks for whatever they're asking for, get it then. You don't want any sudden movements because we don't want them to assume that you're reaching for a weapon or something like that. So just always have your hands visible where they can see them.
Yeah, I think, of course, I think all of us have had those kind of conversations with our children and probably will continue to do it even when our children get grown. And now those of us who have grandchildren, we still have those kind of conversations. I go to the gym. I've been going to the gym for quite a few years, and I was going to Hot Springs Athletic one morning, and it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was stopped by a policeman, and wasn't really sure why I was stopped. And the only thing he said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to the gym. So, he wanted to see my tags, my registration slip and all those things. And I let him see that. And he told me, he said, you ran that stop sign. I didn't argue with him. It wasn't a stop sign, it was a yield sign. And of course, I did yield. That time in the morning, who's out there? Nobody's out there. But he did kind of harass me a little bit. I've always had people on the police department since I've been here that I've been able to communicate with, and I said something to the chief at that time, and he just made a statement that guy's nuts. He's always, I didn't think much of it, but I knew that those kind of things can cause you real problems. And all you're doing is just trying to go from point A to point B.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because one of the things that we've learned out of the George Floyd situation is that the officer who murdered him had numerous complaints, numerous citations against him and yet he still was on the force and still able to deal with the public. When y'all see things like Armada Arbery, and I'm just picking on the most recent ones that have been in the news, and George Floyd, what does that stir in your hearts? What kind of emotions, what kind of thoughts does that stir in your hearts?
Well, let me just say, and I want to put this disclaimer out first. I do not agree with the looting, the burning, and all that. I wish that wouldn't happen, but I can understand the anger. I can understand why people are upset. It angers me. I think I don't know any way you could humiliate a black man more than what was done there, to have your knee on his head or his neck, and he's telling you, I can't breathe, give me water, I can't breathe. And here's a man calls out for his mother, and then you have other policemen that are standing there, and none of them do anything or come to his rescue. I thought I shared with a friend of mine just yesterday, and I remembered the movie. I think it's A Few Good Men. I can't remember the ones, but at there was a code red call, and young man was killed. And at the end of it, when they had gone to court, the young black man said, "What did we do? What did we do? We didn't do anything wrong. We just followed the orders. We just did what we was told to do." And the other man said, "No, we did wrong, because we were supposed to protect and help those who could not help themselves." And when I see policemen who are supposed to be under the guise of protecting, serve and protect, and you can stand there, and I sat down and I just looked at my watch. 9 minutes, 8 minutes, that's a long time. Why wasn't he put in the car?
Yes, sir.
He was already in handcuffs. Sure, it angers me. And so, I mean, I don't want to go out burning and looting and all those kind of things, but I think those men need to be held accountable for that. And what angers me, I guess, more than anything, because, and I don't want to take up too much time, but I remember back years ago, there was a little bit of a riot thing in my hometown, and I happened to be there, and I would, was where I shouldn't have been. Went to a place, I was asked to go. Didn't really know what was going on, but there were white guys that were standing on top of the roof. They were shooting. Bullet went through my back window, went right over my head, and all of this kind of thing. But at the end of the day, those guys got off, and a black man was killed. They got off. And to this day, I know the only reason we got off, because we couldn't get off or they couldn't let him off without letting us off. And it just, because the only thing we were really being charged for was unlawful assembly. Mm-hmm. We didn't have no guns. We didn't shoot nobody or whatever. But they let the other guys off, and we went to court, and those guys didn't show up, and they threw it out of court.
Yeah. Wow. So, John Meacham's written a book called The Soul of America. It's a great read. It's a great audible listen. And one of the things he talks about is all the lynchings in the South, not just in the Jim Crow era, but, even up to modern days, and how few, I think, out of the thousands of reported lynchings, I may be wrong, so I don't want to be quoted, have to check the source, but not more than maybe 60 people ever were called to account for that out of thousands.
Wow.
just like what happened with Omar Arbery, how long did that case go on before, if the video hadn't have come out, it'd probably still be shoved under the blotter. So how does that make you guys feel when you see that stuff? The anger, I think that we, as white people, we don't understand. It's not just anger over that incident. It's anger over centuries of discrimination and put down. So respond to that, please.
Yeah, it makes us angry. It hurts because we have watched this go on for so long. Even in my short years of being here on this earth, I have witnessed for so much. And I agree with them that I don't agree with the looting and the rioting, but I do agree with peacefully protesting. We just want to be heard. We shouldn't have to fear if I drive to the gas station, I'm going to get pulled over and get shot. I shouldn't have to, every time I get in my car, wondering, am I going to make it back home? And even as a person, I'm not even in the streets doing anything wrong, but when I see a police officer, I make sure everything is correct because we never know what's going to happen. And just watching it, what crushed me the most is he cried out to his mama. As a black man, our mama always told us, I'll always be there for you. And so I understood what he meant when he said mama. That crushed my heart because mama's always there for us. We grew up in houses, a lot of us grew up in a house where there wasn't no man. And mama did everything. As for him to cry out to his mama, that crushed my heart. And as I watched the other officers around, we always been told that if you have a problem with officers, we can come and report it. That is not true. I heard you talk about all the incidents that the officer had already done. I myself personally have been experienced where officers have took money out my pocket, and I have did the right thing and tried to go to the police department, the chief, and everybody and report it. Nothing was done about it. And so it's like it don't matter what they do just because they have a badge, they get away with mistreating us in the streets, and it's not right.
And Bryan, you have a connection to the police department as a chaplain. And, I love our Hot Springs Police Department. I know you do too. And I feel like of all the cities in Arkansas, we are exceptionally blessed with ours. But so taking into account your connection with police officers and then the things that you see unfold, what's your reaction?
Initial reaction when I saw it was anger. Like you said, hearing him call for his mother, who I found out had died almost 2 years to the day that it happened to him. We have some exceptional officers at the Hot Springs Police Department. I think everybody knows it, and I think it's been said before. I would say about 99% of our men and women are good. It's that 1% that's bad. So what do we do? How do we make changes? How do we move forward? I think that we need to have new laws. Regardless of what an individual does before he's handcuffed or before she's handcuffed, once that person is handcuffed, there shouldn't be any brutality to that person. You shouldn't be able to kick that person. You shouldn't be able to hit them with a baton, slap them in the face. And if the officers feel that they have the right to do that, once that person is handcuffed and they're doing that, they should be charged accordingly, just like you and I would. How many of us would have the opportunity to still have our jobs if we were written up 17 or 18 times? So why do they have that? And then another issue, and it's kind of what you just mentioned, I feel that some of the officers, they don't say anything because they feel that it's falling on deaf ears. So I think that there needs to be a third party to investigate these complaints that have no connection, so that they can look into what's going on and make a smart, rational decision.
Okay, wow, those are good ideas that need to be heard. Just a couple more questions.
Can I say one thing? Let me just interject one thing. I think that, and yesterday I've been preaching a series of messages out of First Kings, and so I got to the part yesterday where Ahab says to Elijah, "Are you the troubler?" And so I used the question, who's really the troubler? Who's really the guilty culprit and all? And we look at police officers, and certainly we have some police officers who are just rude. They just don't do their job and all of this. And this is my personal feeling. I, as a preacher, as a pastor, I try my best never to talk about or talk down leadership. I make a extra effort not to do that. Our president, whoever, I try not to do that. But I do think our president, he can be awful ruthless and saying different things that helps to stir it up even more. And, so when we talk about who's the guilty one and everything, well, who's causing all of this? Sure, our black people need to be held accountable. You're burning down stores. You're burning up something that don't belong to you, going in and taking stuff that don't belong to you and all that. We should never sit back and say, well, that's okay, because it's not.
That's right.
But at the same time, there are other things that we overlook that needs to be addressed as well.
Yes, that's right. And we need leadership that tries to moderate, tries to encourage, tries to console, not stir up more angst.
One thing, John, I would like to also mention is when I indicated that we need to have laws. If we as individuals feel that our lawmakers are not willing to make any changes, we need to make sure that we vote.
Vote, yeah.
We have a voice. Mm-hmm. And don't sit back and not vote thinking, well, my one vote doesn't count. I'll let somebody else do it.
Do you see that much in the black community where folks would say, well, I know I can vote, but my candidate's never elected?
I see it all the time.
Okay. So instead they just don't vote.
They just don't vote.
And then you also have guys that have charges put on them that makes them not able to vote.
Okay.
And so I have experienced guys that I know that are been convicted of crimes that they honestly didn't do, but now they can't go vote because they have this charge stuck beside their name. Mm-hmm. And so now you just counted out another black person that can't go vote because he's convicted of something he really didn't even do.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Just a couple more questions. I appreciate your patience in time today. One of the things that I think would, both these questions are designed to help us as white people know how to be more sensitive to areas of prejudice or discrimination that we might be blind to. Okay? I know there are white people who are deliberately racist. They're raised to be racist, and they're mean. And then I know there are some that don't want to be, but do things unwittingly sometimes that hurt. What are some symbols? What are some things that you see white people doing that we may be unconscious of that sting a little bit?
I don't know if they're unconscious.
Okay.
But for me as a black man,
Mm-hmm.
if I see that you have a shirt on that has a rebel flag on it,
Mm-hmm.
that means something to me. That's telling me what you're affiliated with.
Okay.
If I see that symbol on the front of your truck
Mm-hmm.
or on the front of your car, you're telling me who you're affiliated with.
Mm-hmm.
And from that standpoint, I do believe they know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a conscious decision.
That's a conscious decision.
Put something
Yes.
on your car. That's a conscious decision.
Yes.
Yeah, it sure is.
I have found that some would say things as a jokefully way, but to me, I'm like him, that you're conscious of what you're saying. And I look at a lot of time, even myself, I'm not a confrontational person. And I have met a lot of white people who would joyfully say stuff about black people. And I guess I just takes it in, and I have probably say, oh, they don't know no better. But then I have to wonder, they do know better. They know what you know what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
And then some of them are just so boldly. I have had one to grab me and tell me one time, I don't want you in this building. And that crushed my heart, because as a pastor of a church and you're trying to show the other people the right way to go, and to have a white man grab you by your shoulder and say, I don't want you in this building. I don't want you folks in this building.
You folks.
And so you basically saying you don't want black people in here. And to me, I had to suck that up. And what in the inside, I wanted to knock them out. But I'm watching my congregation who's standing there with me, and I'm just finished preaching to them, turn the other cheek, and then this happened to me. And so I'm like him, you consciously knows what you're doing. And sometimes it come off as you try to pick us to make us explode so they can say, oh, there you go.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Don, anything from you on this?
I think that, and I don't know all about the protesting, and I don't know all of the laws and the background of it, but I am told, and I think there are, from what I'm told, that there are people from the white community who will march with blacks and say they are with them. But some of the times when the looting and different things get started, not all the time is it the black person who really starts that. A white person starts it, and the people who are out there, they already angry, they upset, and so it gets their adrenaline flowing, and then they start doing it too. That's dangerous. That's mean. It's just a more sophisticated way of showing that kind of prejudice.
Right. Good insight.
I was, one thing that, and I have watched the president tweet this, everything. We are not thugs.
Yes.
And that hurts.
That's right.
When someone in leadership look at all of us as thugs. And we just want to be children of God. We want to be our people. We want to be accepted. We want the same rights as everybody else. But when you have people in position who bluntly call us thugs, who bluntly call us out our name, who don't have a problem saying don't like black people, but you want us to follow the laws of the land. That creates problems.
Yeah, it's a real disconnect.
And a lot of people doesn't like that, and a lot of people doesn't grow up to be able to control their anger. So when you have someone who manipulates the situation, and you got a bunch of folks who are already angry, it's not going to say the white people out there riding and looting. It's still the black people riding and looting. But every video I see, got just as many white folks out there as black people.
But it's those stereotypes that we have that, well, that's what black people do.
Right.
And so we just, in spite of the video evidence, we either assume, well, the black people started it or whatever. So, yeah.
But we learned it from the white folks.
That's right. Well, look at Chicago. Talk about thugs, Al Capone and all those. Those weren't black people.
That wasn't black people.
The Hot Springs history of crime and corruption, those weren't black people.
I mean, for years, our grandparents and stuff, they went through white folks coming in, burning down their stores, burning down their churches, burning down their houses. We didn't know to do none of that.
Yeah.
And so I think the Bible said you reap what you sow. I mean, I hate to say it, but a lot of time we learn stuff from what we saw been done to us. And so now you're gonna put in the mindset of a lot of them that I got to go back and get evil for what they done to me. And so that's where a lot of it comes from. It's learned behavior.
Yeah, makes sense.
One thing, I had a conversation with my wife last night, and I was trying to draw some similarities to some things that are going on. It's a choice to be a police officer. And I mentioned to her, it was a choice for me to be a professional athlete. There are times when we're on the field, fans say things about our parents. They say things about us. We can't go up in the stands. If we are, we're fined, or we shouldn't. I've seen it happen before, but my point is it shouldn't happen.
Right.
So we know what we're getting into as a professional athlete. It's the same for a police officer. You should know what you're getting into. So if you're thinking, well, once a person is handcuffed, I can't control myself, maybe that profession is not for you.
Absolutely. Good stuff. One more question. What can white people do to be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem? What would you say to anybody who's watching our conversation today? What would you say that somebody like I could do to help things? Because there are a lot of white people who are really frustrated at this whole situation and want to do something, but we don't know what to do. Is it a political solution? Is it a spiritual solution? Is it a combination of all these things? Talk to us about that for a moment, please.
I think it's a combination of all those things. But to put it in layman's term, do the right thing. I think a majority of the people, I wouldn't say everybody because you always have that percentage, but majority of people know what's right and what's wrong. Do the right thing. If you see something wrong, report it. Don't be afraid to say something. Just try to do the right thing.
I would say give everybody that same respect that you would want as well. I think it's a time that everybody see everybody working together. They need to see us leaders, especially men of God, of all races, together. Not just during the community event, but they need to see us when things are wrong. They need to see us standing together when things are wrong just as well as things are right. I think it's a start that us as leaders, we go out in these communities. I know COVID-19 going on, but are we going to sit back and watch the United States continue to be destroyed, or are we going to come together as men of God and go out here and walk together and kneel with them and get them to listen, and we listen to them as well. But I especially think it's time that they see us doing more together.
Okay. John, I think that and I'm going to speak from the Christian perspective first. I think as Christians, and I hope you don't think that I'm saying this just because I'm here before you. You are one of the few people that I think in ministry that's really real, and I mean that. When you tell me you're praying for me, I believe that. And you take the initiative to come back and ask me, well, how's your son doing? How's your wife doing? You follow up on things. And not everybody does that. I think when we preach, we need to preach truth, not preach what's convenient. I mean, even when we vote, when we look at leaders and all of this, I believe in praying and asking God to give me the wisdom to know how to vote and all of these things. But I think that there are times that we laws are made. You can't. You're not supposed to tell your people this is maybe a good candidate, and yet other people do it in a more shrewd way. I just think that when I hear things, especially coming from the clergy, Obama this, Obama that, and seldom you hear some of those people saying President Obama, but we will say President Clinton, we'll say President Trump, President Reagan, but you don't always get the same level of respect. And sometimes when we looking at those things, and I agree that the president has done some things that's in the favor of Christianity, but we want to be careful that we don't vote for people just because they're giving us what we want. I think we need to look at the whole picture. I'm close with this. Okay. I have had an uncle, and I guess this is the thing that really causes anger down in me. I have an uncle, and I teach in our district Foundation of Christian Ethics, and so I had this uncle who spent over 25 years in prison for killing a white man that he did not kill. But he was drunk, and he didn't know whether he did it or not. And when it was all over, a white man on his deathbed confessed that he was the one killed the man. That's 25 years or more of my uncle's life just gone. Now, the one good side of it, when I was younger and I was out in the world and doing things, and I got on that little spree of drinking and all of this, and one time I really got drunk, and I didn't really know what I had done that evening or whatever, but I believe that's where the Lord really spoke in my spirit. You don't need to go down that road. Mm-hmm. And if it were not for what had happened to my uncle, mm-hmm. I may have gone down that road. Mm-hmm. But and it's sad that we have to look at things like that to bring us back into our right frame of mind. Mm-hmm. So there are things that goes deeper than just right now. Yeah. So
right.
John, let me make one more
yes,
statement.
Sir, please.
Let me say, and you're asking what can white people do, or mm-hmm. let me first of all say that all lives matter. All lives. Know that. Yeah. Let me preface mm-hmm. by saying all lives matter. But we're talking about black lives. Mm-hmm. And so why are we talking about black lives? And something that I think that white people can do is think about this. Now, that you might hear some stats that say that there are more white people arrested than black people. And I'm not saying that that's not the case. But how many videos have you seen where there's been a black officer on a white person's neck? How many videos have you seen where there's a white person jogging in the neighborhood and he's shot by black people? How many of those videos have you seen? And I'm not saying that they're not there, but how many have you seen? So that's why you're hearing Black Lives Matter, mm-hmm. because it's majority of what you're seeing is being done to black people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And I, when that movement first started up, I thought, yeah, Black Lives Matter, but all lives matter. But really in the last couple of years, I thought, I'm good with that. Black Lives Matter, because they haven't mattered to much of America for so many of our years. It's time that we admit Black Lives Matter.
You also hear that you have blacks killing blacks, and it's true. You do have blacks killing black, but when a black person kills a black person, one dead, one going to prison for life. When a white person kills a black person, nothing get done, and that's part of the movement as well. That if we want to see the same justice happen to others that happen to us if we commit a crime as well.
Yeah, justice. That's the prophets called for that. Jesus called for justice. And yeah, that's the American ideal, and hopefully someday it'll be a reality for blacks and for every minority that gets crushed under the foot of American culture. Well, I want to thank you guys for doing this. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your honesty, and I hope it helps. I hope everyone who listens says, "Well, I'm doing some things that I don't need to be doing. Didn't realize it, but now I know I might be offending, and maybe we can do some things better." And I'm thinking maybe we could close with a word of prayer. Would that be all right?
Yes.
Father, thank you for these three men, for their families. Thank you for their willingness to share today about their experience, an experience with which we white people just have no real reference point. So, Father, I pray that you will give us ears to hear and hearts to follow doing the things that you teach us, to work for justice, to love our neighbor, and to walk humbly with you. And we pray in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. And I appreciate all of you who have watched today. And I pray God will use this to stir some positive direction towards loving one another, towards racial justice, and towards just being a family. Blacks, whites, all of us together.